Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do, nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. Well, John Lennon's famous song has echoed down through the ages since he wrote it, and has become a kind of a song that captures a common objection against Christianity and religion, and that is that religion is bad for the world. Is it? Well, welcome to Glad You Asked, where we try to tackle some difficult questions with clear and simple answers, and hopefully honest answers as well. And today I want to think about this question. It's not a new accusation, but it's certainly one that is heating up. You know, it used to be that Christians and Christianity was accused of self-righteousness. Christians were accused of being hypocrites or being holier than thou. But today it's much more common to find Christianity being accused of being toxic or immoral or corrupt or poisonous even. Now you might hear a common objection that goes along the lines of, you know, religion has caused nearly all of the major wars down through history. Have you heard that? It's been said to me before. Or, you know, Christianity is really just a way to oppress people. Well, I don't want to talk about religion in general, but I do want to talk about Christianity in particular and try and grapple with whether this is true and whether the impact on society that Christianity has is overwhelmingly positive or overwhelmingly negative. When people raise this objection, it could be that they're thinking about some kind of personal experience of Christianity or Christians. Maybe they've been hurt by someone or hurt by the church. But for most people, they're thinking about those times in history where Christians have done very bad things in the name of Christianity. Here people often bring up the Crusades or the Spanish Inquisition, or more recently they might think of the conflict in Northern Ireland, or a few years ago they might think of the horrific or church abuse that was documented in the media. In our own country they may even think of the way apartheid was held up as an ideology and backed up by the church in many ways. Well, I have to admit right up front that these claims are not without their foundation. There is no way around the fact that very bad things have been done by Christians and in the name of Christ. And we can never excuse any injustice or atrocity done by someone claiming to follow Jesus. But it's also true that in popular culture, these claims have been greatly exaggerated. I just want to look at two of them and make a couple of comments about each. Let's look at the one that is perhaps most widely held, which is the one I mentioned earlier, that all of the wars, or at least most of the wars down through the ages, have been caused by religion in general and Christianity in particular. Today it's accepted almost as a fact, you can't even question it, that this is true. But is it true? Well, the authoritative resource on all things related to war is the Encyclopedia of Wars. 3 volumes, wonderful bedtime reading, I'm sure. But they've done the research, and their conclusion is that of the 1,763 known conflicts down through history, 6.98% of them have been motivated by religion. Let's call it 7%. Now that's not nothing. 7% is not nothing, but it's certainly not most. And if you take Islam out of the picture, of course, that number would drastically reduce as well. So I think it's hard to say that the wars, on balance, have been motivated by religion as the driving force in most cases. In fact, if you just had to look at the number of conflicts and wars that are caused by atheistic philosophy or humanistic philosophy, there is no comparison. It is estimated that under Stalin's communist reign, more than 20 million people, maybe as many as 50 million people, were killed. That's 20,000 a day, even at the most conservative estimate. 20,000 a week, even at the most conservative estimate. Or what about the 35 million that were slaughtered in communist China? Or Pol Pot, who during his reign in Cambodia killed 2 million of the population out of an 8 million population. That's a quarter that were killed. And in each case, these atrocities were motivated by a particular worldview, an atheistic worldview. Or we just have to look at the world wars to realize that the majority of conflicts have been driven not by religion, but by other factors, political factors. World War I, 8 million people killed. World War II, 35 million people killed. The point is, The facts don't point towards Christianity being the major cause of conflict down through history. Let's have a look at another example, which is often cited, the Spanish Inquisition. Now, the Spanish Inquisition was a tribunal that was set up by the Roman Catholic Church in the late 15th century, and their job was to root out heresy, wrong thinking, wrong theology, wherever they found it. And so they went throughout the empire and did this for almost 3 centuries, well, 3.5 centuries, in fact. And people would go on trial, and very often brutal methods were used to get them to recant their beliefs. Now, people say, often you'll hear, that hundreds of thousands of people were killed during the Spanish Inquisition. I've heard journalists say that 1 million people or more were killed during the Spanish Inquisition. The reality, though, is that that doesn't bear up to the facts. If you do a bit of research, you'll discover that between 3,000 and 5,000 people were killed during the Spanish Inquisition. That's about 14 a year. Now, that's inexcusable. Christianity can never be forced down someone's throat, and the Bible never allows for the kind of treatment of someone who disagrees with you that was displayed during the Spanish Inquisition. But the claims and the numbers have been greatly overblown, haven't they? By contrast, the French Revolution, which was a secular conflict, as many people were killed in a single day as were killed in the 350 years of the Spanish Inquisition. Again, no act of brutality in the name of Christ can ever be condoned, but we do need to get our facts straight. But what about harm in more general terms? Do Christians and does Christianity on balance contribute positively or negatively towards society? Well, an honest look down through history will show you that Christianity has had an overwhelmingly positive impact on society. In the earliest days of the Christian church, Christians were known for their good deeds. The Apostle Paul went on a 10-year food aid program to try and raise food and support and relief for those who were experiencing a famine in Jerusalem. In his day, it was one of the biggest poverty relief efforts on record. Christians, though they were a minority group in the Roman Empire, had a massive impact on the social problems of the day. During the early days of the church, there were massive social problems like practices of abortion and infanticide and child abandonment and people killed in the gladiatorial arenas. And it was the Christians who stood up and they cared for those in need. They took them in, they adopted orphans, they protested against the gladiators and ultimately put an end to all of that. And they did so because of their understanding of who God is and their understanding of the sanctity of human life made in God's image. In the 4th century, the Roman Emperor Julian mounted a campaign against Christians because he was afraid they were taking over the empire by the stealth of their good deeds, as he put it. By the stealth of their good deeds. I love that. And so he instituted a practice that all the pagan temples had to come up with a welfare program modeled on the Christian practice that was seen in the churches. We can think of William Wilberforce and his tireless efforts in the 1800s to bring an end to the slave trade, driven by his Christian convictions. We can think about Lord Shaftesbury, who used his personal resources to liberate women and children and to change the perception of mental illness, to establish food programs, and to ultimately change the social landscape of the UK. We can think of Martin Luther King more recently, who stood up and at great cost to himself spoke out using his biblical framework against oppression, racial oppression in particular. What about the impact that Christians have had on social structures in society, especially in the West? Scientific enterprise really grew out of a conviction that we have a creator and that the world can be studied and examined. And so the earliest scientists were often Christians. Hospitals grew out of a Christian approach to healthcare. Modern universities were founded upon a Christian understanding of education. Orphanages and children's homes grew out of Christian concern. Most legal systems in the West are built on the foundation of God's law. And today, even the majority of charities, if you have to do a search, the majority of charities have a Christian foundation or at least Christian roots. Christian practice and thinking influenced other corners of the society as well. It influenced the arts and music and literature in profound ways. We could go on. The point simply is this, that the positive impact of Christianity on the world as we know it is undeniable. So what do we say in response to those instances where people who name themselves as Christian do terrible things in the name of their faith? or in the name of Christ? Well, the first thing is to say that it is not right. Every time that happens, it is not right. Or maybe not evil per se, but where Christians have been unkind or prejudiced or treated people as lesser human beings because they are different or because they live differently. But what we understand is that human nature, as described in the pages of the Bible, tell us that we are sinners, all of us, fallen, and capable of great harm and great evil. We can't get away from that. Christians are not exempt from this. Christians are not good people simply because they are Christians. Now, what makes you a good person is when God starts to reshape you in His image. Christians can be great saints and they can be atrocious sinners. But that doesn't make the Christian faith itself guilty. It certainly doesn't make God guilty. Jesus was very clear about the way we are to treat others and how we are to interact with the world. In fact, He summarized the whole Christian ethic as loving God, but loving others, loving our neighbors. That's what Christianity is supposed to look like. You might remember these words from Luke chapter 4. They're very famous words. Most people know them, but they are pretty surprising. Luke 6, verse 27. Jesus says, "But to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. If someone slaps you on the cheek, turn them the other one as well. If someone takes your coat, do not withhold your shirt from them. Give to everyone who asks. And if anyone takes what belongs to you, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you." What kind of a selfless approach to life is that? Do you see it anywhere else in society? Where we're called to love even those that we most strongly disagree with. You see, when Christians have treated others badly, they have deliberately or perhaps negligently forgotten or distorted what it means to be Christian. But you can't judge Christianity, and you certainly can't judge Christ by the worst of its members. That would be like judging Bach or Mozart and writing them off because of a bad performance of one of their compositions. Now, what the world needs is not less of Jesus, but more of Jesus. Not less of Christianity, but more of Christianity. See, when we come to the Bible story and we come to the heart of it, we realize that violence actually is at the heart of Christianity, but in a very unexpected way. The one who made us to love Him and love others, experienced violence and hatred at the hands of those that He made in order that He might come to pay for the root cause of that violence and that hatred. When Jesus went to the cross, that's what He was doing. And He was displaying that it is not right to turn in antagonism and turn in hatred towards somebody, but to reach out to them and to seek to do good for them. And He did the ultimate good by paying for our sins at the cross. And for those who've experienced this kind of love, it sets us on a path and it gives us the resources to be able to forgive even our enemies and to pray for those who persecute you. See, Jesus told us to follow Him, not to take up our weapons, but to take up our cross. And those who follow Jesus in this way have always made a positive impact on society. Well, I'd love to hear your comments and questions, so do get hold of me. You can get hold of info@emmanuelchurch.co.za, and let's interact on this question. If you'd like to ask some more questions, I'd love to hear them.